The night was colder than usual. The human janitor, Mark, walked slowly through the empty street. His shift at the cleaning depot had ended late, and his boots echoed against the cracked pavement. He pulled his old jacket tighter, trying to hide from the wind. The city was quiet, almost too quiet. Broken street lamps flickered weak light. Shadows moved like ghosts between broken walls. Most people stayed inside at this hour. They feared the gangs, they feared the alien patrols, and they feared the silence itself. Mark was tired. His back hurt from hours of scrubbing metal floors. He dreamed only of his small bed and maybe one stale loaf of bread left on his table. He thought of nothing else, until he heard it. A voice, faint, almost like the wind. "Please, human," it whispered. Mark froze, his eyes scanned the street. Empty doors, broken windows. Nothing moved. He thought it was his mind playing tricks after a long day. He stepped forward again. Then, the voice came again, clearer, trembling with fear. "Please, human, pretend to be my daddy. Just for one day." Mark stopped, his breath caught in his chest. The words made no sense. Who would say such a thing in this dead city? From the shadows of a ruined shop, something shifted. A small figure stepped forward. Mark's heart jumped. He expected a thief, maybe a child from the gangs, but what came out made his hands shake. It was a girl, small, her skin faintly glowing under the moonlight. Patterns of silver ran like veins across her arms. Her eyes were too bright, too alien, and yet filled with tears. She wore torn clothes, too big for her frame, and her feet were bare on the cold street. Mark blinked hard. He wanted to believe he was dreaming, but the girl raised her head, her lips trembling. "Please, human, please pretend, just for one day. I need a daddy." Her voice cracked with desperation. For a moment he could not speak. His mind raced. An alien child here, alone, begging him for something so strange. This was dangerous. Patrols hunted, abandoned. Alien children, anyone hiding them could be arrested, beaten, even disappeared. "Why me?" Mark whispered without meaning to. The girl looked at him with eyes that carried both fear and hope. "Because you stopped. No one else ever stops," she said, her words soft but sharp like knives. Mark looked around quickly. The street was still empty, but every broken window felt like an eye watching. He took a slow step toward her. "Where are your parents?" he asked. She lowered her head, her glowing patterns dimmed. "They left me. I was too weak. They did not want me anymore." His stomach turned. He could not imagine parents abandoning a child, even an alien one. But the sadness in her voice was real. He could hear it, he could feel it. "You can't stay out here," Mark said, his voice harsher than he intended. The girl flinched, hugging herself tighter. "I only ask for one day to feel safe, one day to not be alone," she begged. The wind howled down the street, carrying scraps of paper and dust. Mark's hands shook inside his jacket. He knew if soldiers found him with her, it would mean trouble, maybe worse, but leaving her here felt like leaving a kitten to wolves. He knelt down slowly, his old knees cracking, his eyes level with hers now. "Listen, girl, I don't know what you think I can do," he said. "I'm just a janitor. I have nothing." His voice was heavy with truth. Her small face lifted, and tears slipped down her glowing cheeks. "You have more than nothing," she whispered. "You have kindness, and that is what I need." Mark swallowed hard. Her words cut deeper than any weapon. He thought of all the people in this city who passed each other without a glance. All. The cold stares, all the silent doors. And now this fragile creature was asking him to pretend, just for one day. A noise echoed in the distance, the sound of boots striking the ground in rhythm. Patrols. Mark's heart jumped. The girl's eyes widened in terror. She rushed forward without thinking and grabbed his hand, her fingers thin and cold. "Daddy, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. Mark stared down at her, his rough hand holding hers. He had no answers, no plan. But in that moment, he made a choice he did not fully understand. He pulled her closer, hiding her small frame behind his old jacket. "Stay quiet," he murmured, his voice shaking. The boots grew louder. Lights flashed on the far corner of the street. The girl pressed her face into his chest, clinging as if he was her only world. Mark stood there in the middle of the broken street, the cold night biting his skin, the danger moving closer, and a strange alien child calling him Daddy. He did not know why he stayed. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but deep inside his tired heart, something told him this was only the beginning. The boots faded into the distance, leaving behind silence once again. Mark did not move, for a while, his rough hand still holding the trembling alien girl close. Her glowing skin flickered faintly like a candle about to die. He felt the weight of her fear in every shiver. When the patrol sounds were gone, Mark let out a long, shaky breath. He looked down at her small face. Her eyes were closed, but a tear still rolled down her cheek. "You can let go now," he whispered gently. But the girl did not release his jacket. Her thin fingers clung like iron. I am sorry," she said in a voice broken by shame. "I know humans don't want us. I know this is dangerous, but please, I only want one day where I feel like I belong." Her words pulled at something deep inside Mark, a part of him that had been silent for years. He remembered lonely nights after his own daughter had been taken by sickness. He remembered the empty chair at his table, the silence of a home where laughter once lived. He shook the thought away. This was different. This was an alien child, not his, not even human. Yet her pain felt the same. Pain needed no language, no race. Just, "One day?" he asked, his voice low. The girl nodded quickly. "Yes, one day. I promise I won't cause trouble. Tomorrow I will leave, and you will never see me again." Her words felt like both relief and sorrow. One day sounded small, but one day could change everything. Mark sighed, looking around the empty street, the wind biting his face. "All right, one day," he said slowly, "but only one." The girl's glowing eyes widened. Hope burst through the sadness. She smiled, weak, but real. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered. The word fell heavy on his heart. Mark guided her quickly down the street, his boots crunching against broken glass. He led her to his small flat on the edge of the workers' district. The building was old, walls cracked, the smell of rust and mold inside. But at least it was shelter. When he opened the door, the girl hesitated, her bare feet touching the threshold like it was sacred. She looked at the dim room, the broken table, the single bed, and the flickering lamp. Her eyes widened as if she was stepping into a palace. "You can sit," Mark said awkwardly, pulling out the old chair. She sat carefully, like she was afraid the chair might vanish. Her glowing patterns lit up the dark room. And for the first time, Mark realized how fragile she truly looked. Thin arms, small frame, bones showing through her skin. His stomach twisted. She was starving. He searched the cupboard and found half a loaf of dry bread and a small tin of beans. It was all he had left for the week. He stared at it. Then at her. She looked at him, eyes shining with both hunger and fear. "Is this for me?" she asked. Mark almost laughed. "Of course," he said, placing the food before her. She touched the bread like it was treasure. Tears filled her eyes again. "No one has fed me in so long," she whispered, as she ate slowly, savoring every bite. Mark sat across from her, watching. Questions burned in his mind. "What's your name?" he asked. After a pause, she whispered, "Leora." The name rolled soft and strange. "Leora," Mark repeated quietly. The name felt right somehow. He nodded. "So, Leora, why did your people leave you?" She froze, the bread halfway to her mouth, her glowing skin dimmed. "I was weak," she said finally. "I could not fight, I could not work my family. They said I was a burden, so they left me behind." Mark's chest tightened. The cruelty was sharp. He clenched his fists under the table. No child deserved that, human or alien. "You're not a burden," he muttered, his voice rough. Leora looked at him with wide eyes like no one had ever said those words to her before. "Then, can I really be your daughter? Just for today?" She asked carefully, as if afraid he might take it back. Mark hesitated, his heart pounding. "Yes," he said at last. For today? Leora's smile lit the room brighter than the flickering lamp. She reached across the table and held his hand, her small fingers warm now from the food. Thank you, Daddy, she whispered again. As the night grew deeper, Mark gave her his bed. He lay on the floor with an old blanket staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft breaths of the child who had walked into his life out of shadows. Sleep did not come easy. Questions haunted him. What would happen tomorrow? When she left? When patrols found her? When the world came crashing back? But somewhere inside a strange feeling began to grow. A spark of warmth he thought he had lost forever. And in the silence of that broken flat, Mark realized something frightening. One day might not be enough. The morning light crept weakly through the broken curtains of Mark's flat. The city outside was gray, full of smoke and sirens in the distance. But inside the small room there was a quiet Mark had not felt in years. He woke to the sound of soft humming. His tired eyes blinked open, and he saw Leora sitting on the floor, her glowing patterns faint but steady. She was tracing shapes into the dust with her finger, her face calm, almost peaceful. Mark sat up slowly, his back aching from the hard floor. He watched her for a moment, wondering if last night had been a dream, but when she turned and gave him a small smile, he knew it was real. Good morning. Daddy? She said shyly. The word hit his chest again, heavy but warm. Mark coughed awkwardly and stood, brushing the dust from his clothes. You're awake early, he said. She nodded. I don't sleep much. Too many memories chase me. When I close my eyes, her voice was soft, but her eyes carried shadows far older than a child should bear. Mark walked to the small cupboard, finding nothing but a cracked mug and a little water. He poured it and handed it to her. She drank, slowly, her glowing veins shimmering as the liquid touched her lips. She looked around the room again, her head tilting like a curious bird. Everything here is strange, she whispered. She reached for the lamp, turning the switch off and on, marveling at the flicker of light. Your world has tiny suns in glass, she said with wonder. Mark chuckled despite himself. That's just a lamp, he explained. But to her it was magic. She touched the rough table, the peeling paint on the wall, even the rusty spoon left on the shelf. Each thing was a treasure in her eyes. Her excitement stirred something in him. He had lived in this place for years, seeing only its cracks, its dirt, its emptiness, but now, through her eyes, it looked different, alive. As she explored, Mark remembered his promise. Only one day to make her feel safe. He tried to hide the ache in his chest because already it felt like one day would not be enough. Daddy, she whispered suddenly, holding up the stale piece of bread he had left. Is this what humans eat every day? Mark frowned. Not always, sometimes better, sometimes worse. She nodded, holding the bread carefully as if it was something rare. She sat down at the table and pulled out a small piece of cloth from her pocket. It was torn and dirty, but she unfolded it with great care. Inside was a small drawing made with faded ink. Mark leaned closer. It was a sketch of tall figures, alien figures with glowing patterns like hers, and one small figure in the middle, alone. This was my family, she said quietly. I drew it when they were still with me, but now it feels like they are shadows. Her voice trembled. Mark's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her she was not alone now, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he asked, Why call me Daddy? Why not ask for a friend or a protector? Leora looked at him with those bright eyes, tears forming. Because a protector can leave, a friend can betray, but a daddy means family, even if only for one day. Her words silenced him. Mark turned away, pretending to tidy the broken plates. His heart was heavy. The day passed slowly, but with strange warmth. Mark showed her how to sweep the dust with an old broom. She laughed at the way it scratched the floor. He gave her his only pencil and a torn notebook. She drew strange stars and shapes from her world, and then, carefully, a picture of him and her holding hands. Mark stared at it for a long time, his throat dry. You're a good artist, he said finally. She smiled proudly. I wanted to remember this day, even if it is my only one. As the sun began to set, shadows stretched across the walls. A sound outside broke their peace, the rumble of a patrol vehicle. Mark stiffened, his heart raced. He rushed to the window, peeking. Through the curtain, soldiers moved slowly down the street, their armor reflecting the last light. Leora froze, fear flooding her glowing eyes. She pressed against the wall, whispering, "They are searching for us. They will take me." Mark turned back quickly. "Stay quiet," he hissed, pulling her into the corner. They waited in silence, the sound of boots on the street echoing like thunder. Mark's breath was shallow, his hand instinctively covering. Hers, the patrol passed without stopping, but the weight of danger lingered in the room. When the noise faded, Leora clung to his arm, trembling. "See, Daddy, even if I only have today, it is the best day of my life," she whispered. Mark stared down at her, words failing him, because deep inside, he knew something he dared not admit. He was beginning to want more than one day. He was beginning to believe she belonged here, in his broken home, in his broken life. But the world outside would never allow it, and tomorrow was coming fast. Night came heavy over the city, the air filled with smoke and the distant hum of engines. Mark sat by the window, staring into the dark streets, his hands rough and restless. He knew the world outside was closing in. Behind him, Leora sat curled on the bed, her glowing patterns, dim like fading stars. She was humming softly to herself, trying to stay calm, but every time boots echoed in the distance, she flinched. Her small fingers clutched the blanket tighter. Mark rubbed his face with both hands, his mind racing. It had only been one day, yet already the secret felt heavier than he could bear. An alien child in his home, abandoned, hunted, calling him daddy. If the patrols found her, it would not only be her life at risk, but his too. He thought of his neighbors, old Mrs. Kellen with her sharp eyes, the factory men who always sat outside drinking bitter soup. They all noticed everything and they all talked. If anyone saw the glow of Leora's skin through the cracked window, whispers would spread, whispers that brought soldiers. "Daddy," Leora whispered, breaking his thoughts. He turned to her, her eyes shining faintly in the dim light. "Are you angry with me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mark shook his head quickly. "No, girl, I'm not angry," he said, but his voice was rough. "I'm just thinking." She slid off the bed and walked to him, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. "You regret helping me," she whispered. "I can feel it." Her words were sharp with sadness. Mark sighed deeply, looking down at her. "No, Leora, I don't regret it. But this is dangerous. If they find you here, they'll—" His voice broke off. He could not finish the sentence. Her small hand reached for his, her glowing fingers curling around his calloused skin. "Then don't let them find me," she said simply, her eyes full of trust. "Protect me, Daddy, just for today." His chest tightened. The weight of her trust was heavier than any chain. He nodded slowly. "I'll protect you," he said, and he meant it. Though fear gnawed at his heart, the night stretched long, filled with sounds of engines and metal feet patrolling outside. Mark tried to rest, but sleep would not come. Every creak of the floorboards, every howl of the wind made him think the soldiers were at his door. At dawn, the danger became real. Mark stepped outside to fetch water from the pump. The air was sharp with the smell of fuel. On the corner of the street stood two soldiers in black armor, their helmets glowing faintly. They questioned a man who shook nervously, pointing down the road. Mark froze, his stomach turning cold. They were asking about alien children. He heard the words clearly. A girl, small, glowing marks, escaped from the holding camps. His hand shook as he filled the bucket. He forced himself to walk calmly back inside, closing the door gently, his heart pounding. Leora looked up at him from the table, sensing his fear. "They're searching for me, aren't they?" she whispered. Mark nodded grimly, setting down the water. "Yes, they're close." Her shoulders slumped, her glowing skin dimming. "Then I should leave, Daddy. If I stay, they will hurt you too." "No," Mark snapped. his voice harsher than he intended. Leora flinched, but he softened, kneeling before her. "No, you're not going anywhere, not while they hunt, you hear me? One day, that was the promise, and the day isn't over yet." Her eyes filled with tears, she nodded slowly, clinging to his arm. "Thank you," she whispered. The hours that followed were heavy with fear. Mark kept the curtains closed. He told her to stay quiet. Every knock in the distance made their hearts race. Every shout on the street felt like it was for them. In the silence, Leora drew again in his notebook. This time she sketched a picture of his small home, of the cracked table, of herself sitting by the window with him beside her. She showed it to him with shy pride. "See, Daddy? It is not empty anymore." Mark stared at the drawing for a long time, his throat tight. "You're filling it with life," he said quietly. But even as he spoke, a sudden pounding shook the walls. 3 sharp knocks at the door. Mark froze. His blood turning to ice, Leora gasped, dropping the pencil, her eyes wide with terror. "Stay back," Mark whispered, pushing her gently toward the corner. She obeyed, pressing herself against the wall, her glowing patterns dimming as if she willed herself invisible. The knocking came again, louder this time. A voice barked, "Inspection, open up!" Mark's mind raced. If he opened, they might see her. If he refused, they would break the door. There was no safe choice. His hands clenched into fists, his heart hammered in his chest. He took a deep breath, looking at the small alien girl hiding. In the shadows, her eyes locked on him with trust and fear, and for the first time Mark understood the truth. This was no longer just a promise of one day. This was a secret that would either save them or destroy them. The knocking at the door finally faded. Heavy boots stomped away and silence returned. Mark leaned against the wall, his breath ragged, sweat dripping down his face. He closed his eyes, whispering thanks to whatever power had saved them this time. Leora crept out from the shadows, her small body trembling, her glowing patterns faint like dying embers. "Daddy, they almost found me," she whispered, her voice breaking. Mark knelt down and pulled her into his arms. "It's all right, girl, you're safe now," he said, his rough voice softer than he had ever heard it. She clung to him tightly, burying her face in his chest. The fear lingered, but as the hours passed, something changed. The promise of one day began to feel less like a shield and more like a gift both of them were trying to hold on to. Mark tried to distract her. He gave her a small piece of chalk he found in the corner. She ran to the wall and began drawing shapes, stars, suns, and strange curved lines. Her glowing fingers smudged the chalk as she worked. "These are constellations from my world," she explained, her voice filled with pride. Mark sat on the floor watching her, his chest heavy but warm. She turned and drew a stick figure beside a smaller one, holding hands. "That's you and me, Daddy," she said with a smile. Something inside him cracked. He had promised himself this was pretend, only pretend. But hearing her call him Daddy over and over, seeing her smile, feeling her trust, it no longer felt like acting, it felt real. Later, he showed her how to peel a potato, one of the few left in the cupboard. She laughed when the skin fell uneven. "You're better than me," Mark said with a half smile. "That's because you're teaching me," she answered proudly. He boiled the potato in a dented pot, the smell filling the small flat. Leora clapped her hands when the steam rose. "It smells like warmth," she said, eating slowly, savoring every bite as though it was a feast. Mark ate little, watching her more than the food. Each small laugh, each curious glance at the broken world around her, brought light back into the room he once thought dead. When she finished, she picked up the pencil again and drew another picture, this time of herself sitting in a chair while Mark stood behind her, a hand on her shoulder. "This is a family picture," she explained shyly, "even if it is only for today." Mark stared at the drawing, his throat tight. He wanted to tell her that it was more than today, but fear kept the words trapped. As night came, the city outside echoed with more patrols. Mark lit the lamp and sat by the table. Leora crawled onto the bed, wrapping herself in the old blanket. "Daddy, can you tell me a story?" she asked softly. Mark hesitated. It had been years since he told anyone a story, but he nodded. Once there was a man who lived alone. He began slowly. He thought he had nothing, but one day a small star came down to visit him. Leora's eyes widened, her glowing cheeks lifting in a smile. "And did the star stay with him?" she asked eagerly. Mark looked at her, his chest heavy. "For a while." "Yes," he answered. She nodded, satisfied, and closed her eyes, whispering, "Then this story is mine." Before drifting into sleep, Mark sat in silence, listening to her breathing. He stared at the cracked walls, the flickering lamp, the empty shelves. Yet for the first time in years, the place did not feel empty. It felt alive. The weight of the secret was still there, the danger still waiting outside. But in that moment, it did not matter. What mattered was the girl who trusted him enough to call him Daddy. Mark leaned back, in his chair, whispering to himself, "It's supposed to be pretend only for one day." But his heart already knew the truth. Pretend had become real. The next morning was colder. Smoke from the factories hung thick over the city. Mark woke early, his back stiff from the chair, his eyes heavy from little sleep. He looked toward the bed. Leora was still there, curled. Under the blanket, her glowing patterns faint like embers in the dark. For a moment, Mark let himself believe everything was normal, that this small, fragile girl truly belonged here. But the illusion shattered when a loud voice echoed outside. "All residents, prepare for inspection." The sound of boots and engines followed, closer than before. Mark's blood ran cold. He rushed to the window, peering through the torn curtain. Armored soldiers moved door to door. Neighbors lined. Up in the street, faces pale with fear. This was no random patrol. This was a full search. Leora stirred, sensing the tension. She sat up slowly, her glowing eyes wide with fear. "Daddy, they're coming, aren't they?" she whispered. Mark turned back, his jaw tight. "Yes, and they're searching every home." Her small hand shook as she clutched the blanket. "They'll find me. They'll take me away," she said, her voice trembling. Mark knelt by her side, placing his rough hand over hers. "Not if I can help it," he said firmly, though inside his stomach churned with dread. The knocking began down the street. Doors slammed open, soldiers barked questions, neighbors begged and cried. Mark's heart pounded louder with each step the soldiers took closer to his door. He quickly searched the flat. There were few places to hide, the cupboards were too small, the walls too thin. But then his eyes landed on the loose floorboard beneath the table. He had used it before to hide broken tools from tax collectors. It was narrow, dark, but maybe enough. "Leora, listen," he whispered urgently, pulling the board up. "Get inside, quickly." She shook her head, tears spilling. "No, Daddy, I don't want to leave you." "You're not leaving," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "You'll only hide until they go. Then you'll come back out, I promise." Her glowing patterns flickered with fear, but she nodded slowly, crawling into the small, dark space, curling her tiny body tight. Mark lowered the board back, leaving a small crack so she could breathe. The pounding came sharp and violent. "Open up!" a soldier shouted. Mark wiped the sweat from his brow, his hands trembling. He opened the door slowly. Two armored figures stood outside, tall and cold, their helmets glowing faintly. One shoved him back with a metal arm. "Inspection." The soldier barked, pushing past him. Mark forced himself to stay calm. "I'm just a janitor, I have nothing," he muttered, but the soldiers ignored him. They searched the small flat, throwing aside the broken chair, pulling open the empty cupboard. One of them even ripped the thin blanket from the bed. Mark's heart thundered. His eyes kept darting to the table, fear gnawing that they would hear the faintest sound from below. One soldier stopped, scanning the room with a device that hummed. The glowing lights flickered red. Mark's chest tightened, sweat dripped down his neck. "What is it?" The second soldier asked. "Trace energy, faint but old," the first replied, staring at the floor, his boot resting dangerously close to the loose board. Mark swallowed hard, forcing himself to speak. "That's from my tools. I used to fix lamps before the factory banned side work. Maybe that's what you're picking up," he said quickly, trying to sound annoyed rather than afraid. The soldier glared at him through the helmet, silence stretched, then he grunted. "Nothing here worth taking." With a shove, they stormed out, leaving the door wide open behind them. Mark collapsed to his knees, his breath rushing out, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He pulled the board up quickly. Leora's glowing eyes peeked out, wide and wet with tears. "Are they gone?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Mark lifted her out gently, holding her against his chest. "Yes, they're gone," he whispered back, his voice breaking with relief. She clung to him tightly, her whole body shaking. "I was so scared," she sobbed into his chest. "I thought they would take me. I thought I'd never see you again." Mark stroked her hair awkwardly. "It's all right now, you're safe," he said, though his own heart was still racing. For the rest of the day, the fear never left. Neighbors whispered outside. Voices carried through the thin walls. Some spoke of aliens, others of punishments for hiding them. Mark kept Leora close, afraid even of shadows. That night she sat by the lamp, sketching again in the notebook, her hands still trembling. She drew 2 figures standing before a door, one tall, one small, both holding hands. Above them she wrote one word in shaky letters: family. Mark stared at the drawing, his throat tight, his eyes burning. He realized then that the promise of one day had already been broken. It was no longer about pretending, it was about surviving together. But outside, the search grew wider, and whispers spread faster. The threat was not gone, it was only beginning to return. The next evening, the city seemed even darker. Patrol lights swept across the streets, voices of soldiers barked through the alleys. The search had grown stronger, and everyone knew why. An alien child was missing. Mark sat in his flat, the door locked tight, his heart heavy with fear. Leora sat near him, holding the small notebook against her chest. The pages filled with drawings of them together, each picture brighter than the world outside. "Daddy," she whispered, her glowing eyes searching his face. "Will they find us?" Mark wanted to lie, to promise her safety, but the truth was a shadow between them. He shook his head slowly. "I don't know, girl, but if they do, I won't let them take you." Her lips trembled, tears shining in her eyes. "Even if it means they hurt you?" "Yes," he said firmly, the word heavy. "Even then." Before she could answer, there was a loud crash outside. Boots thundered down the hall, neighbors shouted, doors slammed. Mark's chest tightened. The sound stopped. At his door, a hard fist pounded. "Open, inspection." Leora gasped, clutching his arm, her glowing patterns flickering wildly. "Daddy, they're here." Mark pulled her close, his mind racing. He had only moments. He could hide her again. But this time the soldiers would not be fooled. They were too close. The neighbors had likely whispered already. The pounding grew louder, the door shaking under the blows. Mark looked into Leora's terrified eyes. "Listen to me," he said quickly. "No matter what happens, remember, you're not alone. You have me." The door burst open. Soldiers stormed inside, their armor clanging, their glowing visors scanning the room. One pointed at Leora. "There! The runaway!" Leora screamed, clinging to Mark's jacket. Mark stepped in front of her, his arms spread wide. "She's my daughter," he shouted, his voice echoing through the broken flat. The soldiers froze for a moment, their helmets tilting. Then one barked, "She's alien. She doesn't belong here." Mark's voice grew, stronger. "She belongs with me. I don't care what she is. She's mine." Leora pressed her face into his back, her small hands gripping tightly, her glowing tears soaking into his jacket. The lead soldier stepped forward, raising his weapon. "Move aside, human, or be taken with her." Mark's heart pounded. Fear clawed at him, but he did not move. His feet felt rooted to the floor. "If you take her, you take me too," he said, his voice steady. Silence filled the room. The soldiers exchanged glances. Whispers from the hallway grew louder. Neighbors, peeking through cracks, seeing a human stand against armored soldiers for an abandoned alien girl. The lead soldier lowered his weapon slightly, hesitation in his movements. "Why protect her? She is nothing to you." Mark's eyes burned, his voice cracked but firm. "Because no child is nothing. Because she called me daddy. And I won't betray that, not for you, not for anyone." Leora sobbed louder, her glowing patterns brightening. Like fire, she looked up at him, whispering, Daddy, please don't let go. I won't, he whispered back, his arms tightening around her. For a long moment, the soldiers stood frozen, caught between orders and the scene before them. Then slowly, the lead soldier stepped back. This one is not worth the fight, he muttered coldly, turning toward the door. Report nothing, move on. The others hesitated, then followed, their boots echoing down the hall. The door left. Open behind them, Mark stood trembling, his breath ragged. He barely believed what had just happened. Leora clung to him, crying into his chest. They didn't take me. You saved me. Mark knelt, holding her face gently in his rough hands. No, you saved me, he said softly. You reminded me what it means to fight, to care, to be human. She threw her arms around his neck, whispering through tears. I don't want it to be only one day, Daddy. I want every day. Mark closed his eyes, his heart breaking and healing at the same time. Then every day it will be, he whispered. You're mine now, no matter what the world says. Outside, the city remained dark. Soldiers marched. Fear ruled the streets. But inside the broken flat, something stronger than fear lived, a human and an alien child, bound not by blood but by a choice. A choice made in the face of danger. A choice that changed everything. And for the first time in years, Mark believed in tomorrow. Not because it was safe, but because he would not face it alone.